There is a moment in Friends that I keep coming back to. Every single time it makes me see Joey Tribbiani completely differently than the show ever intended. Joey has just found out that Chandler kissed his girlfriend. Not accidentally, not a small thing. A real kiss, behind his back, with a woman he actually cared about. And Joey is furious, justifiably. He stops talking to Chandler, stops being his best friend, stops doing any of the things they did together every single day. And then Chandler spends Thanksgiving in a box as a gesture of apology because Joey told him that is what it would take.
I'm sorry, this means a lot to me. I want you to be my friend again.
The show plays this as a comedy bit. Chandler in a box, everyone laughing. But watch what happens the moment Joey opens the box and forgives him. His whole face changes. Not because he wanted to punish Chandler, because the punishment was already costing Joey more than it was costing Chandler. Joey does not want distance. He never wants distance from anyone he loves. The whole thing was agony for him, not power. And once you notice that, something shifts about this character entirely. Most people see Joey as the simple one, the lovable one, the big, friendly, slightly dim friend who likes sandwiches and women and is good for a laugh but never really the center of anything serious. And that is exactly how the show wanted you to see him for 10 years. But I do not think that is the truth. I think Joey Tribbiani was the most emotionally intelligent person in that entire apartment. And the fact that nobody around him ever fully noticed, including the audience, might be the most quietly heartbreaking thing the show ever did. I am genuinely curious what you think before we go any further. Do you see Joey as just the simple, funny one, or have you always sensed something more complicated underneath all of it? Let me know down in the comments. I genuinely want to know what you think. Let us start with the one thing about Joey that the show always treated as a punchline. The thing I think was actually his most remarkable quality. Joey loves people, not in the careful, guarded way most of the others love people. Not in the way Chandler loves, which comes wrapped in jokes and deflections and a constant need to preempt rejection. Not in the way Ross loves, which comes loaded with ownership and the terror of loss. Joey loves people fully, immediately, and without any condition attached to the loving. His friends are more important to him than almost anything else he has. The show proves this over and over, and then laughs at it or uses it as a plot device and almost never stops to acknowledge what it actually means. A man in his 30s, in New York, who genuinely chooses his friends over his own comfort, his own pride, and often his own interests. Almost every single time. That is not stupidity. That is a kind of love most people spend their whole lives trying to achieve and never quite managing. If you genuinely enjoy these kinds of deep character breakdowns, the things most fans completely miss, make sure you go ahead and subscribe. There are many more of these coming, and I think you will really enjoy them. Now here is the thing about Joey that becomes genuinely fascinating the more closely you look at it. He grew up in a house with 8 siblings. 8. A loud, crowded, chaotic Italian Catholic family in Queens. Resources were scarce and attention had to be shared among 11 people at the dinner table.
Hey.
And what does a child learn in that environment? They learn to be loud enough to be heard. They learn to be entertaining enough to hold the room. They learn that love in this specific house is not given privately and quietly the way it might be in a smaller family. It is expressed through noise and food and showing up and being present and never ever leaving someone behind. Watch Joey through that lens, the way he moves through every room like he is still in that house. The way he makes noise, fills space, lights up the moment he walks into any gathering. The way food is not just food, but comfort and belonging. The specific language his family used to say "I see you" and "I love you" without having to say either. And the way he shows up, over and over and over, for everyone, without being asked. That detail matters more than it seems. Because showing up, in Joey's world, was never a small thing. It was the thing. The whole language of love he was taught growing up in that house was presence. Physical, loud, consistent. Presence. And he carried that language into adulthood. He spoke it fluently for every person he cared about, in a group of friends who mostly spoke very different languages. They did not always notice what he was saying. Now here is the part most people never think about deeply enough because the show goes past it quickly and everybody just nods and smiles. At one point, Joey is finally, genuinely, actively pursuing a woman he is truly attracted to. Her name is Janine. She is by every conventional measure exactly the kind of woman Joey was always looking for. Beautiful, genuinely interested in him, and he had been working to win her over for weeks. And then she says something unkind about Monica and Chandler. She does not like them. She finds them grating and would rather not spend time with them. Joey breaks up with her. Not reluctantly, not after a long, agonized debate with himself about priorities. He just breaks up with her because his friends are more important than a woman he genuinely wanted. Because in Joey's internal ledger, there is no version of a romantic relationship worth having that requires you to be unkind. Not to the people you love. Think about what it costs a person to make that choice. Janine was not some minor inconvenience in his life. He had been trying to win her over for weeks, and he was genuinely happy when it started to work. And he walked away from all of it, quietly and without drama, because the alternative required him to compromise something he simply would not compromise. That is not how a simple person thinks. That is how a person with extraordinarily clear values thinks. And the show moves on from it in about 2 minutes.
You might want to try Joseph.
The same way it moves on from almost everything important Joey does, as though it is natural and obvious rather than deeply revealing. But that is not even the strangest part. The strangest part is what Joey does with his acting. I do not think people spend nearly enough time thinking about what his career actually reveals about him. Joey is an actor who has spent his entire professional life being dismissed, passed over, told implicitly and often explicitly that he is not quite right for the role, not quite smart enough, not quite the thing the industry is currently looking for. He plays Al Pacino's rear end. He gets dropped into commercials for products that do not work. He gets fired from a soap opera for giving one interview where he exaggerated his own contributions. When you think about it, that is the most human and understandable mistake an actor in that position could possibly make. And he keeps going. Every single time. He does not quit. He does not collapse into bitterness or cynicism, or the kind of corrosive resentment that a decade of rejection can build inside a person. He goes to the next audition. He puts on the weird costume for the embarrassing side job. He learns his lines, shows up on time, gives it everything he has, and then starts over when it does not work out. This is not stupidity. This is a particular kind of courage that the show consistently treats as a joke. Look at Drake Ramoray, because this detail tells the whole story in miniature. When Joey finally gets that role, finally gets the break the entire previous run of the show has shown him grinding toward, he loses it. He told a magazine that he writes some of his own lines. The writers put his character in a coma out of spite. And Joey, rather than suing anyone or throwing a fit or abandoning the industry entirely, waits for years and eventually gets the role back. That level of patience and resilience, sustained across an entire decade of professional rejection, is genuinely extraordinary, especially in a person who is consistently treated as the least intelligent person in any room. The show never quite frames it that way. But it is there, and then I noticed something that almost nobody really talks about.
Hey, why can't we use the same toothbrush, but we can use the same soap?
Something that changes the shape of everything I just described. Joey's career rejection and Joey's love for his friends are not separate parts of his story. They are the same story. A man who grew up in a house full of people, learning that love means showing up and never leaving, who then goes into a profession built entirely around being chosen, repeatedly, by people who will replace you the moment someone better comes along. Joey spent his entire career being asked to perform a kind of being chosen, the same thing he had spent his entire childhood learning to give, freely to the people around him. No wonder he kept the two worlds completely separate. His friends were the place where love was unconditional, the way it had been in that queen's house. His career was the place where love had to be earned again and again, with no guarantee it would survive the next season. And that split between those two worlds is something he managed with a kind of quiet discipline that nobody around him ever acknowledged or even noticed. When he came home from a failed audition or a lost role, or another humiliation dressed up as an opportunity, he did not bring any of that into the apartment. He walked through the door, and he was just Joey again, the one who laughed and ate and showed up, and never let the industry's verdict on his worth become the group's verdict on his worth. And that separation protected him. Because the part of Joey the show coded as simple, the warmth and the generosity, was actually the most carefully protected thing about him. He did not bring the transactional logic of his career into his friendships.
Some words are so dog.
Dog?
He kept that room clean. And then there is the Monica and Chandler secret, a storyline that almost always gets discussed in terms of the comedy around it, and almost never in terms of what it reveals about Joey specifically. Joey finds out that Monica and Chandler are secretly together. He is the first person to know, and from that moment, across multiple episodes, he carries that secret on his own. He does not tell anyone, he does not gossip about it, or leverage it. He does not trade it for social capital the way anyone else in that group might have been tempted. He does not slip up out of social clumsiness the way the show might have played it for an easy gag. He holds it, carefully, because they asked him to, because they matter to him, because his loyalty to the people he loves does not bend under the pressure of curiosity or convenience. And then when Rachel finds out, he has to hold 2 secrets. And when Phoebe finds out, 3. He is essentially the confidential container for the entire emotional infrastructure of that relationship, carrying information about 4 of his closest friends, doing it without ever becoming the source of the drama rather than its guardian. That is not a simple person. That is a person with a profound, largely invisible sense of responsibility toward the people he loves. The show used it for comedy, but what it actually demonstrates, if you step back from the laugh track, is that Joey was the most trustworthy person in that entire group. And almost nobody ever said so. This is the wound underneath the wound. It is not that Joey was afraid of success, or afraid of failure, or afraid of being ordinary. It is that he carried quietly and without ever articulating it, the same fear most people who grew up in big chaotic families carry. The fear that in a large enough crowd, you can still disappear. That love can be right there in the room with you and still not quite reach you, because there are so many other people also needing it at the same time. Now look at his relationship with Chandler.
You're a man-child, okay? Now go get changed because everybody's ready.
Because this is where the hidden truth becomes impossible to ignore. Joey and Chandler should not, by any reasonable logic, have been as close as they were. Chandler is guarded, sarcastic, emotionally armored in ways that take years to slowly dismantle. Joey is open, warm, present in a way that makes almost everyone he meets feel immediately visible. They are, on the surface, completely different people. But that gap is actually the whole point.
And not only...
Chandler needed someone who would not flinch at the armor. Someone who would sit next to it patiently, day after day, without demanding it come down on any particular schedule. Joey never once asked Chandler to be more open than he was ready to be, and that specific form of patience, unhurried and without agenda, was the only thing that could have ever reached Chandler at all. But watch what actually happens in their friendship over time. Chandler's armor comes down most completely around Joey. The jokes soften. The deflections become less necessary. Joey's particular kind of love, the unconditional, no questions asked, I will sit with you in a box if that is what it takes love, slowly creates a space where even Chandler can actually be a person without performing one. And Joey adores this, not because he needs Chandler's vulnerability or requires it to feel secure, but because Joey is, at his core, someone who wants the people he loves to feel safe enough to be real. He does not talk about this. He would never describe himself in those terms. But watch the way his face changes when the people around him are genuinely happy, or genuinely at ease, or genuinely seen. He lights up, not because he did something impressive, because he was there. That is the contradiction at the center of Joey Tribbiani, and it is not the one most people would guess.
I'm 30.
A man who makes his living, or tries to, by performing, by becoming other people, by standing in front of rooms full of strangers and trying to be chosen, but who in his actual life wants nothing more than to stop performing entirely, to simply be in a room with the people he loves, eating food, being loud, knowing that the choosing already happened and nobody is going to take it back. He is an actor who does not want to act in his own life. Before we get to that, there is one more layer worth examining because it connects everything we have been building toward. Watch the way Joey approaches his craft when it is going well, when he is actually inhabiting a role rather than scrambling for an audition. He throws himself in completely. He does not hedge or intellectualize. He does not stand at a careful distance from the character and observe them the way a more trained actor might.
Really good this year. Man, those horses can crap.
He becomes them fully with his whole body and whatever emotional history he can access. His acting professor, the one he describes in a conversation with the group, tells him to use what is actually in him, to draw from real feeling rather than manufactured emotion. And Joey, who has been told his whole life that what is in him is simple or funny or not quite enough, discovers something. That actually it is more than enough. That what is in him, the warmth and the openness and the refusal to protect himself from an emotion, is exactly what genuine performance requires. He is a better actor than the show lets him fully be. Not in every role, not consistently, but the capacity is there. And the reason it is there is the same reason he forgives Chandler out of the box. The same reason he keeps Rachel's confidence and breaks up with Janine and carries the secret for months. Because Joey has never learned to hold himself at a distance from what he feels. He has never built the armor. And the most vulnerable person in any room turns out always to be the one most capable of portraying love with total conviction. He is an actor who does not want to act in his own life. And the show, which turned his professional struggles into comedy for a decade, never quite noticed something.
Told me that before. Not a mind reader.
The best performance Joey ever gave was every single day in that apartment. Because nothing about his love for those people was performed. And then there is Rachel. This is the moment that most people point to as evidence that Joey was just not built for the serious emotional territory of the show. His feelings for Rachel are played, at various points, for laughs, for awkwardness, for dramatic tension, and eventually for a kind of sad resignation that the show never fully develops before quickly moving on, which is itself worth noticing, because the show's inability to fully sit with what Joey was feeling in that storyline tells you almost as much about how the writers understood him as the storyline itself does. But think about what actually happens in that storyline, beneath the comedy and the convenience of the plot. Joey falls for Rachel while she is pregnant with Ross's child. He does not act on it or make it her problem. He does not perform his feelings to get attention or sympathy the way many of the other characters perform their emotional states. He sits with it, quietly, and keeps showing up for her as a friend. Because that is what she actually needs. And what she needs matters more to him than what he wants. That is not a failure of emotional intelligence. That is one of the most emotionally intelligent things any character on this show ever did. And when the feelings eventually come out, when Rachel briefly reciprocates and then realizes she does not feel the same way, watch what Joey does. He does not become cold. He does not become cruel. He does not turn his unrequited feelings into a weapon or a wound that poisons the friendship. He adjusts. He grieves it quietly, internally, and then keeps being her friend.
Okay.
Because the friendship is real, and the feelings were also real, and somehow he finds a way to hold both of those true things at the same time without needing one to cancel out the other. That is the emotional architecture of a person who has been loving people this way his whole life, fully, with no guarantee of anything in return, and no resentment when the return does not arrive. And here is something worth sitting with, because it complicates the picture in a way that actually matters. Joey is not a saint. He is not presented as one by the show, and he should not be read as one. He can be selfish about food in ways that become genuinely absurd. He can be oblivious to how his behavior affects the people around him. He can be slow to understand social situations that are obvious to everyone else in the room. He is a real person, with real blind spots, and flattening him into a hidden genius would be just as dishonest as flattening him into a lovable fool. The point is not that he was secretly smarter than everyone around him. The point is that he was kinder, and that kindness kept getting mistaken for simplicity by a show that did not always know the difference. All of that is real. None of it is invented by the show for cheap comedy. It is part of who he actually is. But here is the thing about those flaws, and this is the part that I think changes the picture entirely. None of them are the kind of flaws that come from fear, or from armor, or from the need to protect yourself from being hurt. Joey is not selfish about food because he is greedy in the way Scrooge is greedy.
So, what did you guys think?
He is selfish about food because food is comfort, because food is love, because food is the language his family always spoke, and sharing it comes naturally except where he needs it most for himself. His obliviousness is not coldness. He is not oblivious to the feelings of the people he loves. Watch carefully, and you will see that he picks up on emotional states far more reliably than anyone in that group gives him credit for. He is oblivious to social rules and logistical details, and the names of historical figures. He's not oblivious to people. That distinction is enormous, and the show consistently collapses it, treating one kind of obliviousness as evidence of the other, letting the audience arrive at the comfortable conclusion that Joey is simply not paying attention. He always is, to the people, just never to the furniture arrangement or the movie title or the history lesson. He grew up in a house that taught him love is presence, and he practiced it every single day of that decade. In that apartment, with those 5 people in ways that the show treated as background, ways the audience mostly treated as charm. Now think about what the show consistently does with that quality. It is played as obliviousness, as comedy, as the charming vacancy of a man who does not quite understand what is happening around him. And some of that is fair. Joey is not an intellectual. He is not sharp in the ways that Ross is sharp, or quick in the ways that Chandler is quick. He does not understand things the way Rachel eventually understands fashion, or the way Monica understands food. But understanding and feeling are not the same skill. And Joey feels everything in that group. Every shift in dynamic, every unspoken tension, every moment when someone is pretending to be okay and is not. He picks up all of it. He just does not narrate it.
Instead, I stay here, I gain their trust, and then they'll start listening to all the nice...
He does not turn it into a speech. He responds to it quietly in the language he has always spoken. He shows up. He stays. He makes the food and sits in the room and refuses to leave. The show wanted you to see Joey as the lovable simpleton who makes the others look smarter by comparison, but the truth is more unsettling than that. Joey may have been the only person in that group who actually understood what love is supposed to look like in practice. Not the version of love that gets written about and analysed and argued over for 10 straight seasons. The version that shows up every day without announcement. That sits in a box for Thanksgiving because that is what a friend needs. That quietly loves someone who does not love them back and finds a way to keep being their friend anyway. That chooses the people who matter over the career, the pride, the comfort, and the ego, every single time, without making a production out of the choosing. He grew up in a house that taught him love is presence, and he practiced it every single day of that decade. In that apartment, with those 5 people, in ways that the show treated as background, ways the audience mostly treated as charm. And by the end of that show, Chandler had learned to stop hiding. Monica had built something real. Rachel had finally chosen herself. Ross had eventually started to let go of needing to possess what he loved, and Joey had not changed at all. He was exactly the same person at the end of the show that he was at the beginning. Still warm, still open, still showing up, still choosing his friends over everything else, still speaking that same language of love he had brought with him from Queens. The show framed that lack of change as evidence that he was the simple one, that he had not grown or developed the way the others had. But I think it was evidence of something else entirely. I think Joey came into that story already knowing something the others had to spend 10 years learning. Not something academic or clever or sophisticated. Something simpler and harder and more valuable than any of that. He knew that the people in the room with you are the thing, not the career, not the approval, not the version of love that requires the other person to respond in exactly the right way before you allow yourself to feel it. The people in the room, the noise and the food and the presence and the staying.
Okay, it was like 4 years ago. Okay, Ginger and I had gone out a few...
That is the thing. He always knew that. He never forgot it, not for a single episode across a decade of television. Most of the characters on Friends spent 10 years trying to figure out how to let people in. Joey spent 10 years showing them how it was done, and almost nobody watching ever clocked it as the lesson, because he was the funny one. That might be the most heartbreaking truth about Joey Tribbiani. Not that he was overlooked by the industry, not that his career lurched from failure to failure, not that the woman he loved did not love him back. The most heartbreaking thing is that he walked through 10 years of that story as the best example any of them had. The best example of what it actually looks like to love people. And the show and the audience spent the whole time laughing at the sandwich jokes. He was never the simple one. He was always the truest one, and almost nobody noticed. But you just did. And now I want to ask you something directly. Think back to the moments in this show that genuinely moved you. Not the big set pieces, not the famous season finales. The small ones. The box at Thanksgiving. The way he looks when someone he loves is struggling and he just quietly sits closer to them rather than saying anything clever. The way he forgave Chandler without needing to make Chandler grovel. The way he held that secret for months because Monica and Chandler mattered more than any social credit he could have earned by telling it. Those moments were Joey, hidden inside the comedy, hiding in plain sight for 10 years as the simple one. He was the realest one, and almost nobody noticed.